Good morning and welcome to this meeting of Midlothian Cabinet. Can I have any apologies?
Paul Hayes.
And Bob Constable.
Bob Constable.
And the order of business?
As per the agenda.
Any declarations of interest at this stage? Members, if you do discover one as we go, just let us know. It takes us then to minutes of the meeting of the 13th of January. I'm happy to note these. And item 5 is the minutes of the meeting of the Education Appointment Committee of the 4th of February. Again, happy to note. Takes us then on to item 6, which is the development plan scheme for Midlothian number 7. Ian.
Thank you, Chair. Under the terms of town and country planning legislation, there is a requirement for each planning authority, that's all 34 planning authorities in Scotland, each of those to provide a development plan scheme each year, which sets out the programme for the development planning work that they'll be undertaking, which for ourselves will be the Midlothian Local Development Plan, and the arrangements for genuine public participation and engagement. So it's simply an agenda and a timetable for what the authority is intending to do in terms of its planning responsibilities for local planning and the way in which it will engage with communities. So what you have in front of you is Development Plan Scheme number 7, it being 7th year of operation since the legislation passed. It's to a standard format, so there's no big changes from previous years. You'll note in terms of context, there's been some delay in the bringing forward of the proposed plan for the local development plan for Midlothian. There's been some delay which was really caused by making sure we got the transport appraisal right, because there's some key transport elements to the plan which you'll be aware of, and we wanted to make sure we had confidence in relation to those. As you know, the Council signed off for publication the proposed plan at its meeting in December. We've done a lot of the technical work now to make sure we got the documents in place and the work on the website, which is the interactive opportunity for people to make representations. And so the publication of the proposed plan will be in the middle of May, probably around about the 14th of May for publication, for a 6-week period for receipt of any objections or representations, which would take us within the period of the school term. So we wouldn't be doing that out with the school term into the school holidays. The overall aim is to have a local development plan in place fully by summer 2016. But just to mention, that does not mean that therefore we have no planning strategy. We have the existing local plan, which is pretty much up to date. Even though it's a 2008 local plan, the policies and provisions of that plan are still extremely relevant, so and are well used. As Midlothian is part of the Strategic Development Planning Authority, then we also need to ensure we keep an eye on the development plan scheme for the Strategic Authority as well, where it's ourselves and the other 5 councils putting forward, and there'll be a separate development plan scheme which the Joint Strategic Planning Committee will have agreed to go forward to Scottish ministers as well. So with that, Chair, it's just to advise you the recommendations are to approve the document which is attached to the report, and for us to submit that to Scottish ministers by the due date of the end of this month.
Thanks for that, Ian. Happy to accept the recommendations and your reasons for the late delivery of the plan. Thank you.
With that, members agree the recommendations in the report? Thank you. That takes us then to item 7, Regional Transport Strategy Refresh. Ricky.
Thanks, Chair. Members will be aware that SESTRANS, the South East Scotland Transport Partnership, the strategy was approved by the Scottish Government back in 2008. What essentially this report is doing is seeking approval for a refresh of that regional transport strategy. By way of background, it's prudent to point out that SESTRANS as a body, the roles moved away from direct funding and the implementation of transport measures, and it's more about a strategic and a coordinating function. If I reflect on Table 1 over on page 36, it highlights some of the changes there, and just kind of picking out one or two. In terms of Chapter 3, Objectives and Policies, greater tie-in with national objectives, that's more about linking in some of the changes that have occurred in ports, for example, which wouldn't necessarily affect this authority, but it also ties in some of the changes in the rail infrastructure. So clearly the impending Borders rail line is an issue there. It also reflects some of the changes and some of the revision in targets for things like road safety, accident reduction, and also about improvements in the bus tracking, for example, and also cross-boundary cycle initiatives. So it's kind of refreshing the document in that regard. So essentially moving to the recommendations, it's about approving the proposed regional transport strategy for the Setstrand area.
Yeah, thanks, Ricky. Yeah, I mean, this is quite I think, a substantial issue in Midlothian, as we know. We've all had to deal with traffic issues and parking issues and what have you. And I'm certainly getting more now because of the housing estates, where you've got 2 or 3 cars now in families is quite a norm in a lot of cases, and that is causing issues that we're getting with people trying to get out. But there's no way we can deal. I mean, they're historical, I think, and I think we're left with them. And we can, but I think this is important that we get this right, how we're going to deal with it, and also in our town centres. With especially the bigger town, Dalkeith and Pennycook, there are big issues here. I'm wondering whether this might be something that we could we have a seminar on this, or I think would that be a way forward? Don't know.
Sorry, I'm kind of a wee bit confused there, Derek.
No. Well, it's on the parking issues.
I think that's further down the agenda.
Yeah.
I think we have to make sure people are aware that now we don't have dedicated bus routes to and from a certain place, and we now work in a world of connectivity where we have network connections to places. And I think we need to make more emphasis on that as a council.
Members happy to note the recommendations. Section 4. Okay. That then takes us on to item 8, which is the proposed business improvement district for Pennycook Town Centre.
Thank you, Chair. This report updates members on progress as this project, the Business Improvement District proposed for Pennycook Town Centre, this project reaches quite an important milestone, which is going to be the ballot of the businesses involved. An explanation about what constitutes a Business Improvement District set out in the report. We have reported before, so I won't labour it, just to say that the overall aim being to enable a collective approach to local improvements which can stimulate investment and economic growth, and paragraph 2.5 sets out some examples of the kind of things which can be considered. Over the past year, a project officer has been appointed, consultation has been undertaken with the business sector in Pennycook, there's been the preparation of a draft business plan, and now a setting of the date for the ballot of the 26th of May this year. Which of course is critical, and if there's a positive result, then a number of things flow from that. Just in terms of the resourcing, because that is referred to in the recommendations, there was an initial grant from Scottish Government of 20,000, of which 18,300 or so was available then for this work that we've been undertaking. That proved to be a bit short, which is not surprising in as much as the 20,000 from Scottish Government is just a Kickstarter. So we added in 20,000 from Business Gateway to provide a boost to keep the project going, which is fine. And that didn't adversely affect Business Gateway work at all. But there is an issue, which I won't go into in great detail, but there's an issue which is set out in the report about the costs of collecting the levy from the businesses. And really the recommendation will be at some later date we come forward with a report that should be taken up by the council rather than imposed upon the actual business members of the BID, in as much as because we're in a position of almost charging people for the cost of collecting the levy from them, which would seem not a sensible thing to do. So therefore, there would be a cost of £37,000 in total over the 5-year period, which would be required to fill that particular gap. And at this stage, all we're saying is that if the ballot outcome was successful, then it would be a further report, Chair, to Council to seek some provision for filling that cost. Otherwise, with the ballot about to take place, the recommendations are as set out in the report, but happy to take any questions on the details.
Clearly there's been a lot of work done already. I don't know, Councillor Bryant, are you comment?
Yeah, please how it's going at the moment in Pennycook. You can't guarantee what will happen, but at least the groundwork's been done, and I'm fully hopeful that it will be a successful scheme.
We're happy to agree with the recommendations. I think it does make sense, the comment around the costs of the levy, so I think that's a perfectly sensible approach. So happy to move forward on that basis, yeah. Thank you. It takes us then to item 9, the creation of a Scottish Local Authority Business Loan Fund.
Thanks, Chair. This report advises on changes to the business loan funding arrangements. Members will be aware that since 2010, this Council has been one of 9 members of the East of Scotland Investment Fund, which provides loans to businesses, generally small, medium-sized businesses, but generally the quite smaller ones, for 2 primary reasons. One, to address market failure in the provision of finance, in a sense, often lending where the banks won't go and topping up on that, and encouraging increased levels of entrepreneurship and business formation in our local area. And it's been relatively successful, as have schemes in the Highlands and over in the west of Scotland. The intention at national level is to bring together the regional funding groups into a single Scottish Local Authority Business Loan Fund, and that's to be operational from, well, it'll come into operation in April, but lending won't really start until summer. Although it's a national entity, delivery will still be on a regional basis. The new fund will essentially have the same offer, so businesses who are seeking loans should not notice any difference, but the added value will be to greatly increase the scale and operational efficiency in delivering a loan fund to small and medium-sized enterprises across Scotland. So there's advantages of the economies of scale of having a single national entity. Just to be clear, in terms of funding, the arrangements we've got currently whereby that money which is allocated to Midlothian is exclusively for use in Midlothian to Midlothian businesses, in terms of how this authority wants to allocate that money within the normal rules. That doesn't change, so there's no loss in terms of funding going elsewhere. I think in terms of recommendations, then in my view, this is something the Council does need to be a part of, and it's what the expectation is that all 32 councils in Scotland will be part of. So the recommendations are that the Cabinet notes notes progress on the proposed establishment of the new Scottish Local Authority Business Loan Fund, that the Council participates in that we approve at the appropriate time transfer existing balances in the current ESIF and the Midlothian Business Loan account to the new Business Loan Fund, the new national one, and obviously in terms of reports to members, will continue with reports on the development of that fund and also in normal course the individual applications that come from local businesses.
Thanks again, Ian. I'd like to bring your attention to paragraph 2.6, where the success of the West of Scotland Loan Fund and East of Scotland, the number of businesses, 29,000, is certainly something we should be concentrating on. And also the new loan fund will have, what is it, circa 6 million or more. So I'm happy to recommend that the Cabinet notes the progress with the establishment of this fund and agree that the Council participate in the Item 3 approves at the appropriate time transfer existing balances in the East of Scotland Investment Fund and the other loan account, and we'll expect further reports in due course.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, certainly the fund so far has been a great benefit to many local businesses in Midlothian who otherwise might not have been able to start up and establish, and through that we've seen many new jobs being able to be created. I think recognising the difficulties sometimes new businesses have in getting the funding they need to start up, particularly in the current economic climate. So yeah, I think this transition to the new fund will continue to help and support new business in Midlothian. So, okay. With that, happy to accept. Takes us then to item 10, which is the audit of environmental health food service.
Thank you. The purpose of this report is twofold. It's to inform the Cabinet of the outcome of the audit undertaken by the Food Standards Agency and to seek approval of the revision of the food safety enforcement policy. Section 2.1 gives you the background and informs us that the Food Standards Agency audits and assesses the local authority's conformance within statutory requirements, and the full audit was undertaken in July. Section 2.2 sets out specifically what the audit was looking for. If you turn to the Appendix 1, the executive summary found that the authority had developed and implemented a detailed food service plan. The authority had developed a series of documented policies and operational procedures. Authorisation documents were generally satisfactory. Individual officer training needs were identified. Procedures and documentation provided for inspection were being appropriately and consistently completed. File checks of 5 food hygiene premises confirmed that in all cases the authority were completing detailed inspections, and it was evident from audit checks that officers were taking a graduated approach to enforcement, actively working with businesses. And discussion and review of internal monitoring procedures and practices indicated that the authority was monitoring many aspects of food law. So it was a very positive report. Section 3 outlines the areas of importance, resource risk if we don't conform, and Section 4 sets out the recommendations. It's recommended that the Cabinet notes the findings of the Food Standards Audit Report and recognises the sustained efforts of the food safety team to provide effective and efficient frontline services, approves the revised environmental health food safety policy and submits this report to performance review and scrutiny for consideration. My colleague Ross Buchanan is here if you require any technical questions.
Thanks, Mary. There's always been a lot of work done here, and it's a great report, this. So I'm happy to put the recommendations to the Cabinet.
Yeah, I think it does show that when you sort of have this sort of inspection, it looks into the detail behind the work that's happening. It does give that level of reassurance to know that there is so much good work happening, and we're well equipped in this area. So certainly endorse the comments from Councillor Bryant. Happy to accept. That then takes us to item 11, the Welfare Reform Review 2015. Kevin.
Thanks, Chair. This report to advise members of the issues in relation to welfare reform implementation during 2014 and what we anticipate in 2015 in terms of making members aware that universal credit will be introduced into Midlothian from the 27th of April of this year. This is in the background of the range of welfare reform measures that have taken place since April 2013. In Section 3, I outline the circumstances of universal credit in that housing benefit to date has been hosted by local authorities on behalf of the DWP, and we've been responsible for implementing changes and charges locally. Universal credit will now be administered directly by DWP. It's a single benefit which will apply to people of working age. It will only be eligible for new claimants within the criteria listed in Section 3, and replaces the 6 benefits also listed there. And I would make members aware that this is not only an out-of-work benefit, but an in-work benefit in relation to the Working Families Tax Credits. The payment arrangements are detailed in section 3.1 for claimants applying online and the payment in arrears, and the transition arrangements which we as the local authority and staff need to make to work at a local level, which is being undertaken, are detailed in sections 3.2 to 3.4 in terms of the preparation and operational arrangements. There's an expectation that the local authority will sign up to a delivery partnership agreement with DWP, and consultations and negotiations are currently ongoing in that regard to incorporate the preparation arrangements detailed in that section. In terms of reflecting back in 2014, for discretionary housing payment, the arrangements and the budget provision are detailed in section 4, and we've had confirmation from Scottish Government in the past week that the DHP arrangements will roll forward into 2015-16. The benefits cap, again, is detailed in the experience that we've had in the past year about the capped arrangements for couples, single parents and families in the course of its introduction through 2013. That said, with the mitigation arrangements that the Council had taken across a range of services, only 10 claimants were affected by this in detriment during 14-15. And that was minimised due to short tenancy periods in our accommodation and the maximising the use of discretionary housing payment. In section 5.3, I need to bring to members' attention that the rent increase of 6% is being applied from the 1st of April, and notification for the council tax and rent increases are currently being processed. What we've done since 2013 in mitigation is to offset the effect of the bedroom tax, essentially. And as I'm detailing, that isn't feasible in the new financial year of 15-16, as it would otherwise result in reserves falling to a deficit. That said, in mitigation, we outline in 5.4 that we have looked at our temporary accommodation properties, and we've been able to classify a number of those as what's termed specified exemption category. Those that are essentially hostels, either owned or operated by the council, will be exempt from the benefit cap effects. So again, that will mitigate against the numbers of people who are likely to be affected with the proposed rent increase. In terms of the Scottish Welfare Fund, again, the budget provision and the spend analysis is detailed in section 6.1 through to 6.3, relevant to the claimants. And whilst there has been an underspend there, we're looking to maximise that spend in contrast to the homeless furniture budget, which is separate provision, which is overspent, and to make the best budget profile available to those claimants in the new financial year. In terms of the assessment process, that's detailed in section 6.4 through to 6.6 in terms of the assessments of claimants. And we've had a peer review carried out by COSLA in terms of ensuring that we are maximising the value for money as well as the eligibility for claimants, and that came back favourably. In terms of the resource implications going forward into the current financial year, we anticipate that there will be further impact in terms of rent arrears, particularly in relation to claimants who will newly be claiming universal credit, which will be a new arrangement for all concerned, and that we anticipate levels of arrears will increase, and we've made additional provision in terms of budget for that. There is a request in 8.3 in terms of continuing the existing revenue staff who were contracted through the provision from Scottish Government, and we're looking for authorisation for that to continue into the coming year with the unknown quantities that there will be involved in universal credit. An operational delivery group has been set in course between ourselves, DWP and third sector, including MVA and MFIN participants, as well as local housing associations, because the council will no longer process housing benefit for the local housing associations for these new claimants. So we will essentially have 3 arrangements being operated by the council for housing benefit for social landlords, local housing allowance for private sector landlords, and universal credit for new claimants from April 2015. In terms of recommendations, they're detailed in section 9 that we've updated to give members an update on the work that's been carried out for welfare reform, to note the resource implications and the risks which have been detailed, note the service charge and rent increase will be applied to temporary accommodation in this year, albeit there are mitigation efforts in relation to those, and approval for the continuation of existing posts to allow us to manage this process. And to note that the Welfare Reform Group will continue to monitor the impacts of universal credit on its introduction and again report that in turn to Cabinet and Council. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. Yes, clearly it's still deeply disappointing that we're having to continue to mitigate against actions taken out with our control. Between the Council and Scottish Government, the mitigation actions are clearly having a beneficial support for those being impacted, but it all certainly comes at a cost. And you do have to wonder how long that can keep continuing, and it's deeply unfortunate that the transfer of powers over welfare isn't coming forward. Otherwise we might have been able to see a different course of action being taken in some of the issues around welfare reform that we would all want to see happening, to just do away with some of these actions. Obviously I think it is important that we do have the rent increase, but continue to take the mitigating action we can to minimise the impact there, because obviously we need to continue to support the HRA capital plan as much as possible so we can continue the house build programme. Otherwise that could be put at risk. I did want to ask though, obviously the universal credit discussions that are still ongoing, have we has there been a better situation in the information coming forth from DWP? Because previously it had been either very slow or non-existent.
Certainly that has been the continuing situation, and not just for ourselves. There are about 8 authorities in Tranche 1 which we're involved in, including neighbouring authorities at East Lothian, the Borders and the City. Tranche 2 through to 4, because by October of this year they anticipate that it will be effective in all local authorities. But to answer your question, we've had very limited and restricted information prior to the legislation being passed in the last 10 to 14 days. And since then, we've noted that there has been more cooperation and more sharing of information. And that's what's allowed us to look to develop the Delivery Partnership Agreement and to get an idea of the volumes that we can anticipate going into the new financial year, which are estimated to be around 1,053, which is considerably more than we anticipated. But as I say, it does take account of the fact that it is an in-work benefit, so it incorporates people who are already receiving working families tax credits, but it will be for new claimants, so it's a best guess at this stage.
Kevin, just to check, what the implementation date of universal credit for Midlothian, is that end of March?
27th of April.
April. I mean, obviously we have had limited information to work on so far, and I appreciate that there's a partnership agreement being worked forward. Could I ask that we possibly get a report to the Council on the 30th of March with an update on that? Because personally, if we've not got the information in place, I would be suggesting that we simply refuse to implement. I think it would be ridiculous to ask us to implement something that we don't know how it's going to impact on the Council. So we'd be keen to have more detail on that before we have to be forced into a decision. Certainly, it currently feels like that's what's happening, because early indications were that it would be a very, very small number of people impacted by universal credit. Now we're talking over 1,000. That's a major increase. So I would want the Council to have absolute confidence in the information that we have before we sign up to something, because of the impact it will have on the Council as well as the individuals. I mean, we already know that the Scottish Local Government Forum Against Poverty put out figures suggesting that the impact on claimants of the introduction of welfare reform more generally is already, by this year, likely to have cost individuals something like £34 million in Midlothian. This is a serious impact on people who are already probably in a lot of ways in a very vulnerable situation. So I think we need to make every check-in possible that we can to ensure that they're getting all the information we need. And if it need be that we sort of are suggesting that we're not going to implement, maybe that will force the DWP's hand a bit, but certainly see how that works. But if members are okay with asking for that, I would look to have that report to the next council meeting. Any other questions, comments? Kath?
on page 73, 6.3, you're talking about being an underspend in the monies available to help people, and I wondered if this council is being a bit stringent when they're granting it, and now that they've got quite a lot of money left for the next 2 months, are we applying the categories properly?
Yes, I would reassure you that certainly the peer review that we had carried out by COSLA independently indicated that we were getting better value for money given our partnership arrangement with the suppliers that we use, and also the greater choice that we're able to give individual claimants. Because certainly once it was introduced, as we've detailed in section 6.5, we were basing that on the criteria that DWP themselves had originally applied to claimants. But given that the spend profile was not what was anticipated, we reduced those from a high category of claimants to medium, and now we're working in terms of low, so that there's greater eligibility and greater entitlement in terms of what qualifies for claims as well. Yes.
Thank you very much. And the impact on the food banks, has there been increased impact there as a result of this?
We're certainly seeing that there's continuing demand at the food banks, and again that's an area that we're looking to scope into the universal credit changes, because there are concerns in terms of how sanctions are applied for the existing benefits as well as universal credits, and certainly that causes difficulties, and the welfare fund is now eligible for those who are subject to sanctions, which it wasn't before. Whereas again we had to then make people referrals onto the food banks because there was no other means of supporting those individuals. So there is a greater latitude in how we're working with DWP and the food banks in that regard. And indeed we hold stores across the libraries, the homeless office and in the social work centre at Dalkeith, so that we've got emergency provision in those situations as well.
Okay, I mean, certainly don't envy how tricky it must be working trying to plan on the basis of lack of information coming forward, but I know that certainly from the council point of view we're certainly doing everything we can. Recommendations are at 9, and with the addition of a request for the report to next council, members happy to agree? Thank you. That then takes us to item 12, Midlothian Council parking standards. Ricky.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. The purpose of this report is to seek approval for a set of new standards for parking within Midlothian. By way of background, these standards are used when we consider the appropriate parking that should be allowed for in terms of new residences, other facilities and commercial development. In terms of the background, the current standards have been in place since 1996 and they're long overdue for a review and changes being brought forward. With that in mind, we've done a number of things. We have taken account of changing policy and changing standards. That includes the street designing streets documentation. We've also looked at current car ownership and policy where it reflects changes in congestion, air pollution and climate change. We've also consulted widely with other local authorities and the new standards that have arisen from that are appended to this document. One of the issues, for example, that may be of a concern to members is when we look at housing provision. And under 3.7 it's quite clear that we've looked at it quite clearly. By way of background, there has been quite a bit of dialogue between our own council housing services and indeed other housing associations, and that's allowed us to come forward with the revised standards. So moving to the recommendation, it's recommended council approve the new parking standards for Midlothian.
Yeah, thanks, Ricky. As I've said, I think there's a lot of issues in the parking. It covers quite a broad range here, from the town centres to housing estates, and etc. Can I just get a point of information here? Is this, do we approve this in Cabinet, and then does it go to the next council for approval, or is this us approving it? Just to get clarification. It says...
Yeah, the recommendation says council.
And it should be cabinet.
Thanks. Just wanted to make that clear. Therefore, can I say that this might be something that members have, you know, quite a lot of opinions on, I would imagine, within our areas. Would it be pertinent then to have a seminar on this before the council, before it goes to council? Would that be a possible move?
Yeah, I think it clearly an issue that there'll be a number of different viewpoints on, and I think it would be beneficial to have a seminar on this prior to taking a decision, be it back to Cabinet or to from a seminar on to the full council. I think that would be a good.
It's just I think it's a good report. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of work gone into this, and I think but it's important we get this right. And if there are concerns, we'd be better getting them heard and before it comes forward. That's my only thing.
Okay, so members happy to refer this item to a seminar. Thank you. That concludes the public items of the agenda.